Israel has ordered a complete siege of Gaza following this weekend's deadly attacks. Hamas launched the surprise attacks early Saturday morning. The fighting has killed at least 1,200 people on both sides. That number is expected to climb significantly. The U.S. has confirmed at least 9 of those deaths were U.S. citizens. Israel says it has claimed control of the southern part of the country. It has imposed a total blockade of Gaza. Both sides have fired new rockets today. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said its response to the unprecedented attack will change the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan on Sunday about the best path forward for both Israelis and Palestinians.
And there are really two paths before the region. There's the path of greater integration, greater stability, including, critically, making sure that Israelis and Palestinians resolve their differences. Right. Or there's the path of terror that Hamas is engaged on that has not improved the lives of a single person. On the contrary, it's destroyed lives, including Palestinian lives.
The Israeli embassy has confirmed that now the Israeli death toll stands at 900. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin joins us now. David, I think one of the big questions that, knowing your wisdom and experience and expertise in this subject, everybody wants to understand is how was Hamas able to carry out this unprecedented attack without any detection by either Israeli intelligence or U.S. intelligence?
I think everybody is asking themselves that question now. This was a total surprise. And they somehow managed not just to launch thousands of rockets, they also managed to cross the border and even go in by glider. And the U.S. And Israel track as closely as they know how all of the clandestine arms shipments that make their way from Iran around to the Mediterranean and into both Gaza, to the south of Israel, and into Lebanon, where Hezbollah is based, north of Israel. So this buildup has been going on under the noses of the best surveillance that the U.S. can apply to it. Then you have the actual preparations for attack. And the question is, were the plans so well executed that there were no leaks, no extra cell phone calls, no obvious movements, that it was just not detected? Or was it detected? And are people now going to go back and find out that it should have been detected, and that for one reason or another, either just complacency or incompetence, all the warning signs were missed?
That is such an interesting question, and to know why, if it was detected, whether it had been underestimated or what led to the inaction. But now, of course, there is significant response from Israel. David, I've been wondering, because a lot of people and pundits and experts and politicians and people in Congress are talking about, how can the U.S. now respond given the fact that we don't have a functioning Congress at this point without a speaker, given that we have supplied as a country so much aid to Ukraine. And there's this concern that perhaps there's not going to be enough to provide to Israel in terms of support. However, we do also know that the U.S. has so strongly supported Israel in terms of weaponry and funds. So is there enough? Does Israel have enough support of the U.S. to continue its war?
Well, one difference here is that the U.S. is moving its own forces over into the Eastern Mediterranean to be available to Israel. The aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford and its escort ships yesterday got orders to head for the Eastern Mediterranean. They started off in the Western Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean is actually quite a big body of water, almost 2,000 miles from east to west. So it has not arrived there yet. When it does, it will be obviously a visible symbol of American support for Israel. It will be a warning to bad actors like Iran not to try to intervene. And those escort ships are, some of them specifically designed for intercepting missiles. They have state-of-the-art radars on them, and they have state-of-the-art missile interceptors on them. So they would be there, available. And the U.S. has a war plan to defend Israel in the event it gets overrun. There's no war plan to defend Ukraine in the event it gets overrun, but there is a war plan to defend Israel. Now, Israel doesn't need that right now because they've sort of stopped that initial invasion and now are turning around to gear up for what looks like a ground invasion of Gaza. But the worst case scenario here is that Hezbollah, the organization which is based in Lebanon and which has high numbers of very high-quality missiles, decides to enter the fighting, and then you have a two-front war, and then you do have at least the prospect of Israel being overwhelmed.
Yeah. David, let me ask you, because we're talking about unique circumstances here. I think one of the most striking factors in this war at this point is the hostages. Israel says there's dozens of hostages that have been taken. What role does that play? How does that complicate things? And what do you foresee that Hamas would do with that?
I'm sorry, you got very, I only heard the beginning of that, and then you got very faint, but you're asking me about the hostages. Right,
the hostages. What role does hostage taking play in the resolution or where this war is headed? What do you foresee Hamas will do with them or use these hostages?
Well, the hostages are going to be a major factor. And we don't know, but I think we can safely assume that some Americans, probably dual U.S.-Israeli citizens, are among the hostages. And if they have been taken back into Gaza, it is going to be extremely difficult to locate them, much less do anything about going in there and rescuing them. Right now, you would think politically, Netanyahu cannot afford to negotiate with Hamas. He has got to carry through on his threat to destroy Hamas. Now, if Hamas starts to play the American card here with those hostages, that is going to bring in a whole new complication to how this war ends. Now you have those ships that will be off the coast of Israel. You can put special operations forces on the ships, particularly on the aircraft carrier. But sending a hostage rescue team into Gaza is just an extremely high-risk operation, both for the soldiers and for the hostages.
David Martin, thank you always for your insight. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
For more on Israel and Hamas, Dr. Matthew Levitt joins us now. He's the director of Counterterrorism and Intelligence Program at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much for joining us today. So Israel and Hamas have had decades of conflict in the past. Can you talk to us about the circumstances in Gaza and everything that led to this moment, perhaps the timing from your perspective? Is this something that could have been foreseen?
Pleasure to be here. This could not have been foreseen. Hamas has never done anything like this. In the past, Hamas carried out suicide bombings, targeting buses and cafes, shooting attacks, stabbing attacks. Later, when it controlled the Gaza Strip starting in 2007, it developed the ability first to get rockets from Iran and then to produce its own rockets. And over the past few years has periodically gotten to rocket wars with Israel. But invading Israeli territory, literally taking over some 30 communities, massacring hundreds of civilians, teens and 20-somethings at a rock concert, reportedly kidnapping into Gaza children, including infants. Nothing like this has happened, and it's not something Hamas has done in the past. There are lots of reasons why Hamas is concerned right now, but the two main things are, first, Hamas is a proxy of Iran and works very closely with Iran and with Hezbollah. And those three entities, Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, have been meeting fairly regularly now in Lebanon and in Iran. They do that from time to time. That alone wasn't any type of real clue. But it's now clear in retrospect that they all felt so threatened by the prospect of Israel-Saudi normalization that they felt they had to act. Normalization would create a de facto alliance of countries trying to defend themselves against Iran, the UAE, Saudi, Israel, potentially other Muslim and Arab countries. And it would kind of secure the de facto reality that Palestinians no longer have a veto over what the Arabs do. And for Hamas, this, and for Iran and Hezbollah together, this was something they could not tolerate. The concern now is you could have escalation into horizontal conflict, where it wouldn't just be on the Gaza Strip or even just also from Lebanon, but also potentially fighters coming from Syria across the Golan. You could theoretically find Houthi rebels in Yemen, also proxies of Iran, trying to shoot rockets at southern Israel. And this could get complicated fast.
I mean, next step before an all-out war involving so many factions that you just mentioned, how much involvement do you foresee Hezbollah having? We've already seen reports of rockets come out of Lebanon. To what degree do you see Hezbollah becoming involved?
Hezbollah's involvement is the big concern. So far, we've seen only limited rockets. There was earlier today a ground incursion into Israel from Lebanon, but Hamas took credit for that. And Hamas has built up its capabilities in Lebanon with Hezbollah's support and blessing over the past few years. Just in June, Hamas fired rockets from Lebanon into Israel. I think that Hezbollah is trying to keep its powder dry to see whether or not Israel goes in on the ground. I don't see any situation where the Israelis don't go in on the ground with all of these hostages. This is not something that any country can tolerate. And as you heard just a moment ago, at least some of these hostages are in fact American citizens, probably citizens of other countries too. The question is whether Hezbollah from Lebanon and potentially Hezbollah and others from Syria try and create additional sides to this conflict in an effort to distract Israel into having to fight on two fronts, if and when the Israelis go in on the ground in Gaza.
You mentioned Saudi Arabia as perhaps, the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel being a factor, maybe accelerating or explaining this level of an attack, unprecedented from Hamas. What role could Saudi Arabia play at this point? Could they maybe intervene in some way to avoid the cataclysmic outcomes that you were foreseeing?
Hamas has no love lost for Saudi Arabia, and it has put itself strictly in Iran's corner. Yeah. That said, I think it would make a significant impact if Arab countries and Muslim countries, if Muslim scholars around the world came out publicly and said that this type of activity, butchering women and children, civilians, kidnapping people, this is not within what Islam tolerates. This is not permissible behavior. To isolate Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran as the outliers that they are, to demonstrate that this does not, in fact, undermine or throw a wrench in efforts to normalize relations in the region, but maybe even once things calm down, we'll escalate it. If I'm Saudi Arabia and Israel right now, I'm realizing that we need each other even more. Look at the lengths that Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas and their ilk will go to.
Matthew, while I have you here, do you mind giving us a little bit of a history lesson about these organizations? How did Hezbollah and Hamas come to power?
Hamas came to power very slowly and patiently, and in its early years, starting in the 1980s, it was just a terrorist organization. It set its sights on building itself within Palestinian society, and so it would provide services, food, medical clinics, schools, in an effort to build what it called a culture of resistance against Israel. Then in 2006, there briefly was a national unity government between Fatah, the main party that today controls the West Bank and is the backbone of the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas. That fell apart. Hamas turned its weapons on fellow Palestinians, Fatah in particular, and took over the Gaza Strip by force in 2007. And ever since then, there were people who believed that Hamas would be co-opted by governance, that it would be moderated by being the entity in charge of daily life in the Gaza Strip, focused more on garbage collection and paying teacher salaries than on fighting Israel. Those people have been proven wrong in a very, very painful way this week. And it seems that over this period of time, not only were they building up their arsenals, but they were building up their forces and they were training their forces and doing smaller skirmishes that typically involved only rockets until today. The head of Hamas just a few minutes ago released a statement where he makes it very clear from his perspective, this is the first volley in the Palestinian effort to liberate Jerusalem, and that means remove Israel. Hamas, it's important to understand, is not fighting because there's not a two-state solution. Hamas is against a two-state solution. Hamas is only for the destruction of Israel and the creation of a solely Islamic Palestinian state in all of that territory. They're not about compromise. And
just, finally, there's for people who are, stepping in or walking into trying to understand what is going on, there's a great degree of raising awareness about the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza who are not Hamas. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of perspective, too, about, the distinction between supporting the rights of the Palestinian people and what is happening and what we've been seeing since this weekend?
Yeah, incredibly important point. It's not just Palestinians in Gaza, Palestinians in the West Bank, too.
Of course.
Hamas doesn't speak for all Palestinians. In fact, it doesn't speak for most. There are a great many Palestinians, even in the Gaza Strip, where they are the ruling power, who are very much against them, both ideologically and in terms of their failure to govern effectively. And one of the reasons they have not been able to govern effectively is because they prioritize fighting Israel over governing and providing for their people. And so there have been protests in the Gaza Strip over the years, protesting Hamas's prioritization of fighting Israel over taking care of its own people. Hamas uses Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip as human shields, and it fires rockets from residential areas. We've seen videos of this in almost every conflict there's been so far. The Israeli hostages are certainly not being kept in some Hamas base. They are being divided up, we understand, and taken into different places, including residential areas. Hamas leaders have in the past bunkered under hospitals in the Gaza Strip. And there are average Palestinians who are now being put into an incredibly difficult position. They didn't want this, but it's being thrust upon them as the Israelis feel they have to secure the release of their citizens, and Hamas is hiding them in residential areas.
Thank you for your insights, Matthew Levitt.
Thank you.